كنت شاب، فيني طاقة وفيني طموح وفيني شغف، ولكن في يوم من الأيام كنت مسافر، والفضول وداني لطريق تجربة المخدرات، لين ما وصلت لنفق مظلم ما له نهاية. تسألني شو خسرت؟ بقول لك ما خسرته. كل حياتي كانت رعب وخوف وقلق، ولكن في يوم من الأيام واحد من الأقارب شافني وشاف حالتي ونصحني، قال ليش ما تروح للمركز الوطني للتأهيل. تشجعت ورحت للمركز، وتفاجأت صراحة بخبرات وجهود الكوادر الطبية والعاملين فيه. ويوم عن يوم بديت أتعالج بسرية تامة، لين ما لقيت نفسي تعالجت من الإدمان بشكل تدريجي، والحمد لله رب العالمين. اليوم بفضل الله وفضل المركز قدرت أرجع لنفسي ولعائلتي ولحياتي الطبيعية.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، السيدات والسادة، الحضور الكريم، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته، وأسعد الله صباحكم بكل خير من على أرض دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة من أبو ظبي، أرض المحبة والتسامح والتعايش والسلام. نحييكم في هذا التجمع العلمي العالمي. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. From the UAE, the land of love, tolerance, and peace, we welcome you all here today in Abu Dhabi as we gather together at this global ceremony. نرحب بمشاركتكم في هذا الحدث الذي تستضيفه عاصمتنا أبو ظبي، وهدفنا جميعاً بلا شك هو هدف إنساني يخدم البشرية من أقصى الشرق إلى أقصى الغرب. نجتمع اليوم لنتحد جميعاً في مواجهة آفة الإدمان، ولنقف كحائط منيع يتصدى للمؤثرات العقلية التي تهدد الجيل بعد الجيل. Our goal is without a doubt a humanitarian one that strives to serve humanity globally through an unparalleled transformation in the sphere of substance addiction, generation after generation. Psychotropic substances continue to pose a significant and widespread threat to human health, well-being, and lives. However, we are all one team with one goal: to stand in solidarity and tackle addiction. بحضوركم الكريم تنطلق اليوم جلسات مؤتمر الجمعية العالمية لأخصائيي علاج وتأهيل متعاطي المؤثرات العقلية برعاية كريمة من سمو الشيخ منصور بن زايد آل نهيان، نائب رئيس مجلس الوزراء ووزير شؤون الرئاسة. Here today, under the patronage of His Highness Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Presidential Affairs, we are proud to officially launch the sessions of the International Society for Substance Use Professionals ISSUP Abu Dhabi 2020 Conference. وبكل تأكيد كل التحية والتقدير إلى المركز الوطني للتأهيل ومكتب الشؤون الدولية لمكافحة المخدرات وإنفاذ القانون التابع لوزارة الخارجية الأمريكية والجمعية العالمية لأخصائيي علاج وتأهيل متعاطي المؤثرات العقلية لاجتماعهم على تنظيم هذا الحدث العالمي الهام. And of course, a very special thank you goes to the National Rehabilitation Center, the U.S. Department of State, Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement, and International Society for Substance Use Professionals for joining forces and hosting this major conference. تحت شعار توحيد جهود المجتمع الدولي لمواجهة تحدي الإدمان، يلتقي معكم أكثر من 1000 متخصص من مختلف أنحاء العالم ليتباحثوا حول الوقاية من المؤثرات العقلية بصورها التقليدية والمستحدثة، وفي الوقت نفسه يطورون من وسائل العلاج والتأهيل لإنقاذ من سقط في شراك هذه الآفة. Under the theme, Uniting the Global Community to Face the Challenge of Addiction, we are beyond privileged to kickstart this event as we bring together more than 1,000 1,000 specialists and researchers in the fields of addiction, disorders, and its preventive, curative, and rehabilitative programs from all over the world. This constitutes a unique opportunity to build a global network as our respected specialists meet and exchange the latest learning and knowledge about scientific and, of course, research developments in the fields of substance use prevention, treatment, and recovery support. أما الآن حضورنا الكريم، فلنبدأ معكم هذا المؤتمر. يسعدني أن أدعو سعادة الدكتور حمد عبد الله الغافري، مدير عام المركز الوطني للتأهيل، لتقديم كلمة افتتاح المؤتمر. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce His Excellency Dr. Hamid Abdullah Al-Ghafri, Director General of the National Rehabilitation Center, who will be presenting the opening speech of this conference.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، الحضور الكرام، بداية أنه من دواعي سروري أن أرحب بكم في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة في إمارة أبو ظبي في افتتاح الدورة السابعة لمؤتمر الجمعية العالمية لأخصائي علاج وتأهيل متعاطي المؤثرات العقلية، والذي يعقد في الإمارة تحت رعاية كريمة من سيدي سمو الشيخ منصور بن زايد آل نهيان، نائب رئيس مجلس الوزراء وزير شؤون الرئاسة. الحضور الكرام، يتم تنظيم هذا المؤتمر بالتعاون مع مكتب الشؤون الدولية لمكافحة المخدرات وإنفاذ القانون التابع لوزارة الخارجية الأمريكية، والجمعية العالمية لأخصائي علاج وتأهيل متعاطي المؤثرات العقلية، تحت شعار توحيد الجهود المجتمع الدولي لمواجهة الإدمان. ويهدف هذا المؤتمر إلى بناء شبكات عالمية من الشراكات الاستراتيجية والتعاون بين المؤسسات والمنظمات الدولية والمختصين، والاتفاق على آليات للتعاون لتعزيز هذه الشراكات. ويمثل فرصة لتبادل المعرفة حول المستجدات العلمية والبحثية في هذا المجال، كذلك التداخلات العلاجية والتأهيلية، ومناقشة أفضل البرامج الوقائية وإعادة دمج المرضى في المجتمع. ومن خلال هذا المؤتمر سيتم تقديم عدد 80 ندوة علمية متخصصة في هذا المجال على مدار 3 أيام، ويصاحب ذلك 25 ورشة عمل، بالإضافة إلى 15 برنامج تدريبي عالمي للمختصين في مجال العلاج الإدمان على الكحول والمخدرات. بالإضافة إلى أعمال هذا المؤتمر في الواقع الحضوري، هناك واقع افتراضي يتم البدء فيه فوراً منذ اليوم الأول من البث المباشر على مستوى 150 ساعة على مستوى دول العالم، الشيء الذي يعطي هذا المؤتمر الأكبر من نوعه من ناحية مدة العرض ومدة الأبحاث العلمية المنشرة. من الناحية العلمية، يشارك المركز الوطني للتأهيل في أعمال هذا المؤتمر ب7 ندوات علمية لتقديم أبحاث علمية تم نشرها محكمة، والتي دشنها المركز خلال الفترة الماضية، والتي تشمل أنماط التدخين لدى المرضى الذين يتلقون العلاج في المركز الوطني للتأهيل، التأثيرات الصحية لتعاطي المؤثرات العقلية، وتقييم المنهج الإرشادي الشامل للعلاج في مجال الإدمان فيما يختص بالتمريض بالمنطقة العربية، والوصمة الاجتماعية لتعاطي المؤثرات العقلية، بالإضافة إلى دراسة استكشافية لتناول الإدمان السلوكي، وأخيراً دراسة أثر الإدمان على الأسرة للتعرف على أبرز التحديات التي تواجهها الأسرة بسبب مرض أحد أفرادها. ويتم خلال هذا المؤتمر طرح أول دورة تدريبية باللغة العربية يتم طرحها للمختصين في مجال المنهج الإرشادي الشامل للعلاج، وهذه الدورة تم تعديلها وترجمتها إلى اللغة العربية واعتمادها من قبل المركز الوطني للتأهيل. كما يصاحب أعمال هذا المؤتمر مجموعة من الفعاليات، مثل إعلان تكريم الفائزين بجائزة الجمعية العالمية لأخصائي علاج وتأهيل متعاطي المؤثرات العقلية، والتي تعد من الجوائز المرموقة في مجال خفض الطلب على المؤثرات العقلية. وهناك مؤتمر آخر متخصص مصاحب لهذا المؤتمر لمختبرات السموم، راح يتم الحقيقة مناقشة كثير من الطرق الجديدة والعلمية البحثية لاستكشاف المواد المخدرة والكشف المبكر عنها، وكذلك مؤتمر الإمارات الثالث للشباب والذي سينطلق بعد ساعتين من الآن باستضافة مجموعة من شباب دول العالم. هو الحقيقة المؤتمر يعد المؤتمر الثالث، سبق لنا تشريفنا بعمل المؤتمر الأول في عام 2014، وراح يكون في الحقيقة مجموعة من الشباب ليناقشون كثير من أهم البرامج التوعوية والتدريبية المثبتة علمياً. الحضور الكريم، نهاية أود أغتنم الفرصة الحقيقة للتعبير عن شكري وامتناني لأولئك الذين عملوا بجد خلال ال3 سنوات الماضية لجعل هذا المؤتمر يتحقق على أرض الواقع، سواء كانوا من الشركاء الدوليين أو الشركاء المحليين أو حتى من أسرتي في المركز الوطني للتأهيل. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، تشرفنا بحضوركم وتشرفنا بإثرائكم للمؤتمر الدولي في إمارة أبو ظبي، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
شكراً سعادة الدكتور حمد الغافري على هذه الكلمة. Thank you, Dr. Hamid Al-Ghafri, for your statement. Thank you very much. والآن حضورنا الكريم نستكمل معكم هذا المؤتمر ونرحب بالسيدة روبن سالمون، نائب رئيس البعثة المكلف في سفارة الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية أبو ظبي، فلتتفضل لإلقاء كلمتها. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure of welcoming Ms. Robin Salmon, Acting Deputy Chief of Mission at the United States Embassy in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. Please join me in welcoming her on the stage.
Sabah al-khair, good morning, everybody. I'm honored to be here today with so many experts from around the world who have dedicated your professional careers to substance use prevention, treatment, and recovery support. I would like to begin by thanking our hosts here in the UAE and from ISSUP for your efforts to organize this important congregation of experts. And I would like to welcome our international partners, and also my colleagues from the US Department of State's Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs. Thank you all. The issues covered here at ISSUP are vital to the health and well-being of all of our communities. As the United States continues to grapple with addiction and overdose challenges, last month the Biden administration outlined a strategy to decrease overdose deaths in the immediate term, and to reduce drug use and its damaging consequences over the longer term. This strategy prioritizes efforts to expand access to harm reduction, evidence-based treatment, and recovery support services. People who suffer from these disorders deserve compassion and care throughout the recovery process. The United States is not in this fight alone. The challenge of addiction requires a global coordinated response, and that is the vital role of all of the partners here today in this room. ISSUP has been instrumental in uniting the global workforce to integrate the latest learning and methods to support substance use prevention, treatment, and recovery services. They are transforming research into practice. The National Rehabilitation Center here in Abu Dhabi is on the forefront of addiction prevention and treatment. The NRC is a true model for the region and for the world, and it boasts a world-class staff and facility. We at the US Department of State are proud to work with you as partners and as friends. Our US domestic crisis makes our partnership with the UAE and other nations absolutely crucial. Reducing drug demand worldwide is an essential pillar of a comprehensive approach to combating this crisis. My colleagues at the Department of State's Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs are leading the government's worldwide effort to combat drug demand. In countries all over the world, the State Department partners with local governments and civil society to create specialized training programs, such as the Universal Curriculum, to prevent drug use and to treat those with substance use disorders. These programs train prevention and treatment staff and empower trainers to raise standards of care in their own communities. Later this week, alumni from the State Department's prestigious Humphrey Fellows Program will gather as a global partnership of experts to participate in sessions that highlight for university staff how to integrate new prevention and treatment curriculum into the local coursework. We are proud that our academic exchange programs play a part in this global workforce, united towards this critical goal. On behalf of the U.S. Department of State, I want to thank you all for your dedication to facing this global challenge of addiction. May you find this conference, training, and workshop with networking opportunities fruitful in the advance of your important work. We are proud to be your partners. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Ms. Salmon. Thank you very much. And now, ladies and gentlemen, حضورنا الكريم، اسمحوا لنا الآن أن ندعو الأستاذة جوانا ترافيس روبرتس، الرئيس التنفيذي للجمعية العالمية لأخصائيي علاج وتأهيل متعاطي المؤثرات العقلية، والدكتور كيفن مولفي، المدير التنفيذي في الاتحاد الدولي للجامعات لخفض الطلب على المخدرات، وذلك متابعة لأحداث المؤتمر في الأيام الخمسة المقبلة، فليتفضلوا مشكورين. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we now invite Juana Travis Roberts, Chief Executive of the International Society of Substance Use Professionals, ISSUP, and Dr. Kevin Mulvey, Executive Director of the International Consortium of the Universities of Drug Demand Reduction, to follow up with the conference events in the next 5 days, so kindly proceed. Thank you.
Your Excellency, distinguished guests, fellow participants, good morning and welcome to this amazing week of learning, both conferences, trainings, and workshops. ICUDDR, the International Consortium of Universities for Drug Demand Reduction, is pleased to partner with the National Rehabilitation Center, INL, ISSUP, and the Global Credentialing Organization, GCCC. It is our pleasure and our belief that through a consortium and connection of universities, we can build curriculum and training to, as we heard this morning, enable the profession and the professions to best handle and best deal with the issues faced by those suffering from drug dependence. So again, welcome, and it is ICUDDR's pleasure to be a participant and co-partner with this particular program.
Thank you, Kevin. Your Excellencies and esteemed guests, all of you, thank you so much for being here. ISSUP is a membership organisation, and we have over 25,000 members in 197 countries and territories. And part of our mission is really to connect, support, and engage with the workforce. So it's amazing to be here again with you all and be able to do that in person. So thank you so much for coming. This week, we're going to see a huge range of activities, and it's really our pleasure to be part of that. We have 3 tracks of plenary presentations taking place in this room and then the other 2 conference rooms. We have side meetings and trainings that I know that many of you are looking forward to participating in. And we have the opportunity to network and meet each other.
And on that note, it is worth just inviting you all today at lunchtime to meet our national chapters, of which we have in 28 countries delivering ISSUP submission. And they would love to meet you at lunchtime and be able to talk about the work that they are doing on the ground. We have outside in the shared area an in memoriam board, and that's our opportunity to recognise and have the memory of those from the workforce that we have lost. So I welcome you to go and have a look at that board, and please add the members of the workforce, your colleagues, that we may have lost since our last event. Thank you very much to our hosts, NRC. This is an amazing setup, an amazing event. We are truly privileged to be part of it. And thank you so much to ICUDDR and INL. It's just fantastic. ISSUP loves to be a network, and to be able to bring something like this together with these partner organizations is truly a privilege. So thank you to them. Thank you to you all for coming, and I look forward to meeting you throughout the week.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts, and thank you, Mr. Melvi, for telling us more about the following and very exciting following week. And now, ladies and gentlemen, أما الآن حضورنا الكريم أدعو سعادة القاضي حاتم علي ممثل معالي الدكتورة غادة والي من مكتب المخدرات والجريمة لمنظمة الأمم المتحدة لإلقاء الكلمة، فليتفضل مشكورا. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Judge Hatem Ali, representing Her Excellency Dr. Ghada Wali from the UNODC.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الأخ العزيز معالي الفريق ضاحي خلفان رئيس المجلس الاتحادي لمكافحة المخدرات بدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، الضيوف الكرام، سعادة الأخ والشريك الدكتور حمد الغفري مدير عام المركز الوطني للتأهيل ممثلا عن صاحب السمو الشيخ منصور بن زايد آل نهيان، أصحاب السعادة والمعالي الحضور الكريم، يشرفني بالأصالة عن نفسي كمدير إقليمي لمكتب الأمم المتحدة المعني بالمخدرات والجريمة وممثلا عن فريق عمل المكتب أن أنقل إليكم جميعا تحيات وتقدير معالي الدكتورة غادة والي الرئيس التنفيذي لمكتب الأمم المتحدة المعني بالمخدرات والجريمة ووكيل الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة، وتقديرها لشركائنا الذين أوصلونا إلى هذا المحفل اليوم، مضيفنا المركز الوطني للتأهيل، ولكن أيضا شركائنا في حكومة الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، وتمثلهم اليوم سعادة السفيرة مس Robinson, the Deputy Chief of Mission of the United States to United Arab Emirates, also the Executive Director of ISSUP, and all the other partners from the international community who stood with us as the custodian of the drug prevention conventions for the past decades and decades in combating the challenge of drugs and the drug abuse. أيضا أشكر دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة ليس فقط على استضافة هذا المحفل من خلال المركز الوطني للتأهيل، ولكن أيضا على شراكتها مع مكتب الأمم المتحدة المعني بالمخدرات والجريمة التي امتدت على مدار العقد الماضي لتجعل من تواجدنا في أبو ظبي لخدمة دول مجلس التعاون الخليجي منارة ومنصة للتحرك أقمنا من خلالها الشراكات وأقمنا من خلالها الروابط التي أهلتنا أن نعمل على بناء حائط من السد في مواجهة تحديات الجريمة بشكل عام وتحديات المخدرات بشكل خاص، سواء في سبل المكافحة أو في سبل الوقاية والتوعية، والأهم في سبل العلاج وإعادة التأهيل. في الحقيقة نقف معكم اليوم أمام هذا الاختيار الذكي لعنوان هذا المحفل الكريم لتوحيد الجهود العالمية في مواجهة تحدي إدمان المخدرات والارتهان بالمخدرات. في الحقيقة لم تكن الأزمة الاقتصادية العالمية بمفردها التي أضافت تحديات جديدة في زيادة رقعة المزروع من الجواهر المخدرة ودخول لاعبون جدد في مجال تصنيع وتخليق المخدرات والمؤثرات العقلية، ولكن في الحقيقة أصاب أيضا وباء كورونا العالمي كوفيد-19 العديد من مناطق العالم بزيادة الرغبة وزيادة الطلب على المواد المخدرة للتعامل مع التحديات الصحية والنفسية التي صاحبت هذا الوباء، وتحرك العديد من معامل تخليق المخدرات والمؤثرات العقلية إلى دول لم تكن موجود بها بالقبل. كل هذا أدى إلى زيادة أعداد المرتهنين بالمخدرات ومدمني المواد المخدرة أو مسيئي استخدام المواد المخدرة حول العالم، مما زاد من التحدي الذي نواجهه. فيشرفنا أن نكون معكم اليوم على رأس فريق من خبراء المنظمة بمقر رئاستها بفيينا، واسمحوا لي أن أرحب بهم زميلتي جوفانا وزميلي الدكتور وديع معلوف، وهم في الحقيقة يمثلوا فريق العمل الذي عمل مع شركائنا بالINL ومع شركائنا بالISSUP، ولكن ومنذ فترة طويلة عمل مع شركائنا في المركز الوطني للتأهيل وشركائنا بمكافحة المخدرات الاتحادية، الإدارة العامة لمكافحة المخدرات بدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة والقطاعات المختلفة لإدارة المخدرات لمواجهة هذا التحدي. يشرفني أن أكون اليوم أنا من أمثل هذه المنظمة إلى حضراتكم، ويشرفني أن أكون مع فريق الخبراء الذي أتى ليحاول أن يضيف إلى حوارات حضراتكم ويتعلم أيضا من خبراتكم، لأن هذه المنصة ليست فقط بشأن ما يستطيع الخبراء أن يدلوا به، ولكن الأهم هي منصة توفرها الدولة المضيفة بمشاركة الجهات المعنية لتبادل الخبرات وتبادل الرؤى بشأن أنجع السبل لمواجهة هذا التحدي عبر منظومة العلاج وإعادة التأهيل. ولعلنا لا ننسى أننا في هذه المنصة نخاطب العديد من الفئات المجتمعية ومنها الشباب والمرأة، ليس فقط باعتبارهم مستهدفين ببرامج العلاج وإعادة التأهيل ولهم حقوق في الحصول على العلاج وإعادة التأهيل اللازم من إدمان المخدرات، ولكن أيضا باعتبارهم ناقل جيد جدا للمعرفة وقناة فاعلة للتوعية والوقاية من المخدرات، سواء من خلال المبادرات التي تبناها المركز الوطني للتأهيل في مجال الشباب أو المبادرة العالمية لاستخدام الشباب لسفراء الشباب في مواجهة المخدرات التي تشرف مكتبنا بأن يدعمها. حقيقة نتطلع بإذن الله إلى الأيام القادمة وإلى هذا الجمع الغفير المتميز من المتخصصين ومن الخبيرات والخبراء في مجال العلاج وإعادة التأهيل وخفض الطلب على المخدرات عامة، حتى نستطيع أن نخرج معكم بتوصيات ناجعة. كلفت من قبل معالي وكيل الأمين العام لنقلها إلى المجلس العالمي لمكافحة المخدرات في جلسته القادمة بإذن الله، حتى تكون تحت نظر دول العالم من أعضاء هذا المجلس لإصدار القرارات الناجعة بشأنها واعتمادها بإذن الله كأحد الأدوات التي يستخدمها المجلس العالمي لمكافحة المخدرات. مرة أخرى أتقدم بالشكر والتقدير إلى كافة أصحاب السعادة والمعالي من الحضور الكريم على حضوركم وعلى دعمكم هذا النشاط. أشكر القائمين عليه من الحكومة الأمريكية وخاصة شركائنا بالINL والISSUP وباقي الجهات المعنية، وأشكر مرة أخرى مضيفنا الدكتور حمد الغافري وفريق عمل المركز الوطني للتأهيل، ومعالي الفريق ضاحي خلفان تميم رئيس المجلس الاتحادي ممثلا عن حكومة دولة الإمارات التي تستضيفنا اليوم. شكرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you, Judge حاتم علي. Thank you very much. شكراً. أما الآن حضورنا الكريم، فاسمحوا لي أن أدعو الدكتور فلاديمير بوزنياك رئيس وحدة الكحول والسلوكيات الإدمانية قسم الصحة العقلية وتعاطي المؤثرات في منظمة الصحة العالمية لإلقاء كلمته، فليتفضل مشكورا. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Vladimir Pozniak, Unit Head, Alcohol, Drugs and Addictive Behaviors Department of Mental Health and Substance Use at World Health Organization. So please join me in welcoming him to the stage.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege and great pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of the World Health Organization at this remarkable conference. We are grateful for all partners who joined forces at this conference to make an opportunity for professionals from all over the world to strengthen their capacity to address one of the biggest challenges of modern world and public health, the challenge of substance use disorders and addictive behaviors, or what we call addictions. In the World Health Organization, we have long-standing partnership with many organizations which took part in making this conference possible. We are grateful and we are observing with big interest the development of ISSUP as the organization that is becoming really global. We are grateful for the State Department INL program of the United States of America for continued support of international efforts to address the challenges of addiction. Particular thanks goes to the National Rehabilitation Center in Abu Dhabi, which is WHO collaborating center working on addictions. We have long-standing collaboration with many important achievements, and we do hope that this collaboration will continue along the priorities that we have in the world and priorities that we have in the World Health Organization. Let me remind you that international community in 2015 adopted Sustainable Development Goals 2030. In this agenda, one of very few health targets is devoted to specifically substance abuse, namely to strengthen prevention and treatment of substance abuse. The organizations which joined forces for this conference, the audience which is here, and all your colleagues in your countries have important responsibilities for making progress on achieving this health target. We are in the middle of the road between 2015 and 2030. Now it's a critical period when we need to deliver on commitments made by the governments, international organizations, professionals, and overall international community to strengthen prevention and treatment of substance abuse. Working in partnership with UNODC, a few years ago, we developed and released, with the support of the State Department of US INL program, the International Standards for Treatment of Drug Use Disorders. It is my pleasure, first time, to present the Arabic version of these standards. And again, this was possible not only because of collaboration and support of all partners whom I mentioned, but also with a significant input from National Rehabilitation Center here in Abu Dhabi. And thank you, Dr. Al-Ghafri. Thank you, all colleagues who made it possible. With that, I wish all of us, a successful conference, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Buzniak. Thank you very much. شكراً. أما الآن حضورنا الكريم، وكما نعلم فالشباب هم عماد المستقبل، ويشرفنا أن يتزامن هذا المؤتمر مع تنظيم المنتدى العالمي الثالث لرواد الشباب في الوقاية من المؤثرات العقلية الذي يقام للمرة الثانية في أبو ظبي. وخير من يمثل الشباب اليوم هو أحد قادة الشباب في المنتدى، والذي شارك في المنتدى الأول لعام 2014. اسمحوا لي أن أرحب بالشاب محمد حسني من سريلانكا لإلقاء كلمته. Ladies and gentlemen, with our youth being the pillars of the future, we are delighted to announce that this conference consists the third Global UNODC Youth Forum, which is being held in Abu Dhabi for the second time. And here, with us today, we have one of the forum's youth leaders who also participated in the first forum back in 2014. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Mohammed Husni from the Republic of Sri Lanka.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and very good morning to all of you. And also, Aiboan, which means may you bless with a long life, and that's how we wish it back in Sri Lanka, the country that I come from. It's my pleasure and honor to address all of you in this special gathering, and a very important gathering for all of us. And I would like to thank ISSUP for this opportunity, because I have been told I'm the first youth representative who have been given such opportunity to speak at the opening ceremony of the conference. So thank you very much for recognizing the importance of young people and also how we can integrate youth engagement in this whole conversation. I first visited Abu Dhabi in 2014 thanks to National Rehabilitation Center and Colombo Plan, back then when we had the first Global Youth Forum on drug use prevention. And it has been a great journey of 8 years so far. And today I stand in front of you as one of the youth leaders who will be supporting and also facilitating and engaging with the young people in the upcoming third Global Youth Forum to be held in parallel to this forum. The last 8 years has been more than a journey. It has been about exploration, learning, professional development, engaging with the right people, and also getting mentored by the right organization and individuals who have been generous enough to spend their time for young people and also guide us through this journey. I would specifically like to recognize the Colombo Plan as well as NRC for their support in leading the youth engagement in this area. I would also like to mention, when it comes to youth and substance use prevention, it is increasingly the large youth demographic in the world makes it impossible to discuss a future development framework on substance use prevention without taking into account young people's needs, aspirations, and challenges. And that's why it's vital to recognize youth as partners in developing and implementing substance use prevention strategies and incorporate their concerns in all aspects of planning, implementation, and evaluation. And I see this as a great platform and opportunity for all of us to connect with young people and start think how exactly we can engage with them meaningfully and avoid tokenism, but also actually how we can help them engage in this conversation, guide them through the journey, and also involve them as the leaders of today and tomorrow. Finally, I would like to remind that it is the time for us to start realizing the true potential of young people and how they can co-create this journey with the intergenerational engagement. I would also like to mention it is the time for us to dedicate resources in your organizations, in our organizations, to prioritize young people in all our programs. It is time for us to start thinking what are those structured changes you will do in your organizations to engage young people meaningfully and give them opportunities so they are able to realize their true potentials and their aspirations to co-create the future that we all are aspiring for. Thank you very much once again for this great opportunity. And I would like to finally mention, let's work together. Let's consider youth as core group of all the activities we do. Let's guide them. Let's work together, because young people are not the futures of tomorrow. They are the futures of today and tomorrow. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated as we will continue our conference right now. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated as we will continue our conference right now. السيدات والسادة، أرجو منكم الجلوس والبقاء في مقاعدكم، إذ سنستكمل الآن باقي مؤتمرنا لهذا اليوم. So again, ladies and gentlemen, kindly be seated as we will continue our conference in less than a few minutes. السيدات والسادة، نرجو منكم البقاء في مقاعدكم حتى يتسنى لنا تكملة باقي المؤتمر. السيدات والسادة، أرحب بكم مجدداً في هذا الحدث العلمي العالمي. والآن يسعدني أن أدعو المتحدث الرسمي البروفيسور مايكل فاريل، مدير المركز الوطني لبحوث المخدرات والكحول في جامعة نيو ساوث ويلز سيدني، ليحدثنا في جلسته الافتتاحية عن الاستجابة العالمية لاستخدام المنشطات والفرص والتحديات المتعلقة بذلك، فليتفضل مشكورا. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to invite our keynote speaker at the opening session, Professor Michael Farrell, the Director of the National Drug and Alcohol Research Center at the University of New South Wales, Sydney, to speak to us about the responding to global stimulant use challenges and opportunities. Please join me in welcoming him on the stage.
Good morning, Your Excellencies and all participants. I'd like to thank the organizations involved in this for the honor of being involved. And I would also like to congratulate the organizations for putting training at the center of addictions and actually putting training at the center of healthcare, training in addictions at the center of healthcare. It's something we have all been struggling with for many decades. So in that context, I wish to really congratulate you all. I'd also like to congratulate the NRC and Dr. Hammad for the extraordinary things that have been achieved. And as part of that, I'm talking about responding to the global challenge of addictions, and I'm basing this on a global review undertaken with colleagues around the world, and it tries to condense all the information, the evidence base, and to identify where we need to do work in the future. Probably the striking thing about it is it's an effort to try to bring both methamphetamine, amphetamine, and cocaine data together. Often when we discuss them separately, but there's so much overlap with them to try and look at the commonalities, but also to recognize there are differences, but to try and tease that out. I'm coming to you, I put the picture of Sydney up there just to say, to recognize this is global. I think one of the things to state in terms of the global issue, I'm very happy to be talking here on the issue of the rise of stimulant problems. It's a huge challenge for the community. It's also a huge challenge for professionals, and it's a huge challenge at every policy level in relation to the trends we're observing. It is undoubtedly a global challenge. Just to note that I have many colleagues around the world who've been involved in this comprehensive review, but I'm not going to name them all in person, but it is a team effort and not just my team. And I have all of this information available. I'll provide my contact details, and anybody who wants any of these materials, they will be available to them. Just to note that there's a range of different chemicals involved, and the range of these we expect over the next period of time to actually grow. This is not a problem, a diminishing problem, it's a diversifying and challenging problem. And today, in the review, I will concentrate on the two main stimulants that have been really the biggest challenge for us. If we look at it in terms of amphetamines, there's an interesting difference between the amphetamine problem and the cocaine problem in terms of global distribution. We see that the Middle East and the Asia-Pacific region is the region that is significantly overburdened with methamphetamine. Obviously, the United States, it's not unique to that area, but that has been a huge challenge. And just to note, amphetamines have been around for a long while. The challenge of them is when people take them, they provide euphoria, they provide good feelings, and it's not until people use them more that they develop the problems. I'm not going to, with the range of professionals here today, I'm not going to teach you what you already know, but to note probably the distinguishing aspect of both amphetamine and methamphetamine in relation to cocaine is the longer duration of action. If we look at the cocaine problem, we see far more focus in the Americas, but also in Australia. I think one of the things as a trend that we're seeing at the moment that we're quite concerned is we're seeing some coalescence between the distribution of amphetamines and cocaine, and we're seeing these markets increasing together in some countries, particularly in Australia. And again, the effects of cocaine, euphoric, mood elevating, very much a much more drug. And this is one of the problems for people as they become more habituated and more dependent on it, is the difficulty of having the insight to identify the problems they have. Just to mention, because we're here in the Middle East, the problem of captagon, which has exploded in this region. I'm not reviewing it today, but I thought I should mention it in relation to challenge of, again, variations in stimulants. It's a product of some significant military destabilization in different countries, and it's been around a long while. It was used for ADHD, but it is an area that we should pay some attention to and look at in relation to future research and identifying problems and identifying responses that may be unique to it. One of the things about stimulants is they don't fit comfortably into some of our traditional models of problems. They're also they're involved in groups who don't see themselves as having problems, particularly around occupational exposure. That's people with treatment, long-haul drivers, a range of things, people in manual labours, people in the sex industry, and also men who have sex with men. But given the global rise in stimulant use, while I think one of the challenges for us is actually identifying that a lot of the behavior is occurring well outside of the treatment system and not penetrating into the treatment system. So the broad range of social support and prevention strategies beyond just treatment, we need to carefully consider. The other thing is these substances do not come on their own. If we look, it really is an issue of polysubstance use. People aren't very brand loyal. They're using a range of substances, and that again brings the topic back to being an issue of a much more holistic and integrated approach to understanding the context of people using substances and how we support them to move away from problematic use. If we look at the potential in terms of health harms of stimulants and look at fatal harms, we have pretty good evidence if we compare amphetamines and cocaine. I'm not going to go through all of these, just to say that the mortality risk for both amphetamines and cocaine are pretty similar. But if we look at the distribution globally around it, what you see is the highest fraction of deaths associated with amphetamine dependence is reported in Australia, and a lot more amphetamine dependence deaths in the Asia-Pacific region. And for cocaine, we see it's in North America. No surprise, North America. I suspect South America, except we don't have as good data from South America. If we look at non-fatal harms in terms of the effects of stimulants, the most striking thing, of course, is the issue of dependence and development of dependence. And there's very strong evidence for both, and also for non-fatal overdoses. One of the issues for us that distinguishes the stimulants from some of the other substances is the overlap with mental health issues. And the stimulant dependence problems have presented a very big challenge about the interface between substance dependence treatment and mental health treatment, and the need for far better integration across these services. But what we see there is depression, anxiety, psychosis, and violence are all, the evidence for them for amphetamines is stronger than for cocaine, but that's probably more the available literature rather than what we know in clinical practice. If we look at it in terms of the mental health issues, and the reason to emphasize the mental health issues is because I think in relation to stimulants, the challenge of integrating across these fields remains a huge challenge. And if you look at it there in terms of the impact of amphetamines, in particular, the impact of amphetamines on the prevalence of drug-related psychosis has been a huge challenge to many countries, particularly countries in the Asia-Pacific region that have very modest mental health services. And you see there's also risk in terms of suicidality and violence. I won't go into this, but there's no question about the association of amphetamine use and psychosis. All the studies show very strong liability for more psychosis with amphetamine use. And what you see here in this slide on the left there is there's also clear evidence that this type of psychosis is dose-related. So the more methamphetamine use there is, the more days of use, the higher risk of psychosis. There's also a complicated issue, which is the evolution or gradation from drug-induced psychosis to developing schizophrenia or other type of disorders, and we don't fully understand that, but there's clearly aspects of this which are genetic vulnerability and other vulnerabilities in terms of being exposed to amphetamines. There's also a striking physical complications around both cocaine and methamphetamine, stroke and myocardial infarction. Heavy use of these substances is bringing down the age incidence of both myocardial infarction and particularly young stroke, with pretty catastrophic outcomes for some people, particularly with hemorrhagic strokes. And then there's a range of other, but they're two of the very striking complications. So we see that for both cocaine and amphetamines, considerable increased risk for cardiovascular disease. And we're seeing this in terms of we see sudden deaths in middle-aged men around lifelong exposure to amphetamines. We've also got, particularly around methamphetamine injecting, considerable increased risk of HIV, hepatitis C, and there's also particular concern in terms of men who have sex with men around methamphetamine use and sexual risk behavior. This slide here was modeling work we've done around the risk in terms of methamphetamine, in terms of HIV and HCV infection. And the modeling shows a very significant contribution around methamphetamine use and the risk of acquiring HIV and HCV. This is at a point in time when we're beginning to turn the tide on HIV in particular among opiate users. So it presents a very significant challenge for us. We've also got the issue of non-fatal injuries and neonatal outcomes, significant impact on neonatal outcomes. So then the question really is, well, what can we do about this? How can we address these? And I think one of the important messages I come with, which is a message of optimism and a message that actually well-organized treatment responses have a significant amount to contribute. There's a tendency for people to say, because we don't have a straight medication for it, that we can't do things. That's not the case, but it is a more granular approach to treatment. If we look at it, we have a range of psychosocial behaviors. This is a slide I got from Steve Shoptaw in California, but it's in terms of looking at what we want to do with behavior therapies. We want to instill abstinence, maintain abstinence, prevent lapse, and return to abstinence following lapse. It's a pretty straightforward approach. This is a slide from Rebecca McKetton looking at a cohort of methamphetamine users, and the key slide is the one on the left, showing the impact of residential treatment on abstinence. So Obviously, not everybody can be in residential treatment, but there is a role for residential treatment within this area. There's also a very important role for community treatment. This is looking at the role of behavior therapy in a broader context, and this is a network meta-analysis which basically provides support. There's a certain controversy around the evidence for CBT, but overall the view is that CBT in the context of broader community responses, and I'll come back to contingency management in a moment, has a significant amount to add to it. I'd like to note the passing of Kathleen Carroll, who's done major work over a few decades on CBT, both in alcohol and in stimulants, and has provided a program of work that has made a major contribution, and we're very sad to lose her last year. So then the critical bit in relation to behavior therapy is if we look at contingency management, because contingency management is the treatment that we can see makes a significant effect beyond treatment as usual. And yet it is the one globally that we have had the most difficulty moving into mainstream practice. We're currently trying to do some work to see what are the ways to move contingency management into mainstream practice, but it remains a very significant challenge. If we look at the summary of evidence, and I'm aware there's people at the back of the room there who will not be able to see this, but contingency management comes out at the very top. The other things come out, probably the other standout one is the question of what role drug courts or drug diversion in the criminal justice system has. That needs a lot more work because there's a general view that it has leverage, but the other treatments work. They just don't have a specific effect, and it's quite important that we continue to try to integrate these therapies across the board. So I've said that already. The issue really is how do we pull these different treatments together? And I would say that one of the challenges for us internationally will be to develop ways in which we can see that we can better operationalize contingency management. Now, if we look at the pharmacotherapies, this has been an area, particularly from the United States perspective, that there's been a very significant investment in trying to find effective therapies, and they've really led the way from that point of view. Really, the idea would be, could you get an agonist? Could you get an antagonist? Medications that affect mood, cognitive enhancers, or other types of the vaccines or chelators. And really, what we would want would be either to block the stimulant effect, substitute, manage withdrawal, improve cognition, or reverse overdose. And, you know, the evidence at the moment is very partial, but we're beginning to develop some optimism around where we may be going in the future. There's a small bit of evidence around the use of agonist-type drugs, but we need a lot more robust work on it before we can say anything in confidence. There's been, in particular, there's been 2 significant studies in the United States of mirtazapine, and in Australia, we're about to replicate that over the next few years. I think on balance, though, I would quote Steve Shopta on this, we're moving into the phase where we can see the opportunity to develop a framework for pharmacotherapy-assisted treatment to assist the behavior therapies. And the opposite of that would be to be looking at things like compulsory drug detention, basically to get across the message that in some countries, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region, there's a great appetite for compulsory drug detention, but there's very little evidence that it does anything. If not, it may even be harmful. However, drug courts and police diversion, while the evidence may be weakish, the leverage in that area is very important, and it's very important it be developed from an efficacy point of view, but particularly from a cost-effectiveness point of view. So, you know, the message from Steve Shoptaw is that after 25 years, there are some signals of efficacy. There's nothing approved at the moment, but we have to really look how to bring this forward, and we're hopeful to have better news in the future. So when we look at I will summarize these, but basically the other challenges for us are what do we do around harm reduction? The harm reduction framework for stimulants is significantly different than the harm reduction framework for opiates. Some of the modeling work has been around potentially, if we look at the risks around HIV and methamphetamine use, is whether we could look at roles for PrEP. That's pre-exposure prophylaxis type work. There's a range of work around impacting on sexual risk behavior. There's a range of work around HCV treatment, HIV treatment, and there's also issues around paraphernalia that is controversial, but there's a lot of user views of the importance of some of these issues. There may be some of these harm reduction strategies may have an important role simply in gaining contact with users and providing health support and advice, but we need to develop it further. And this was just a thing looking at modeling around PrEP use for men who have sex with men, and there's significant evidence that this is an area that we need to develop significant work on, and there's potential in collaboration with user groups and particular at-risk groups to figure out how we do this better. Then the other one that I think receives very inadequate attention is interventions to improve the mental health of people who use stimulants. In the context, it isn't either people stop and then they get interventions. It's the notion of how do we combine these interventions together as people present to the system. And what we have is we've got pretty good evidence for the use of antipsychotics for people with psychotic disorders, so there's little justification for not using those in that context. In depression, we have reasonably good evidence for the treatment of depression. I think the issue becomes more complicated when if people can't be stabilized and engaged, but the importance of the management of depression in the context of severe stimulant dependence is the potential to reduce suicide risk and the association of significant suicide risk associated with the depression conditions associated with heavy stimulant use are important. So there's a range of interventions that are more than available in some countries, but are often not delivered because the systems really don't manage to work together very well at all. So if we think of challenges and future considerations, the existing models for treatment of opiate dependence don't fit very well. We have a growing supply problem. I don't think that's contentious at all. A global growing supply problem. And we need to figure out strategies for harm reduction, prevention and treatment in the context of that. We've not great engagement with the consumer community around this. We need to look at better strategies for that. We need to continue to build our evidence. We are hoping to develop better pharmacotherapy options. And we also need to apply generic interventions to reduce harms. So the growing problems present a challenge to health and justice services worldwide, without a question. Investment is needed in this underserviced area with limited effective treatments. And those are my contact details. The website, NDARC, UNSW, has a lot of the material, but people are free to email me, and I'm more than happy to supply materials to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Farrell. شكراً على هذه الكلمة, Professor Farrell. أما الآن السيدات والسادة، خلال العامين الماضيين بذلت العديد من المؤسسات والهيئات الإماراتية والعالمية جهود كبيرة ليخرج المؤتمر بهذا المستوى من التنظيم. قاد هذه الجهود المركز الوطني للتأهيل ومكتب الشؤون الدولية لمكافحة المخدرات وإنفاذ القانون التابع لوزارة الخارجية الأمريكية، بالإضافة إلى الجمعية العالمية لأخصائيي علاج وتأهيل متعاطي المؤثرات العقلية. ومن هنا ومن هذه المنصة نتوجه ونوجه التحية والتقدير لهم ولكل من أسهم منهم في هذا التجمع الكبير من شركاء وحضور، ونتمنى لكم أيضاً أسبوع حافل لكل ما هو ثري ومفيد. Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 2 years, many UAE and international institutions have made great efforts to ensure that this conference is built on nothing less than an astounding foundation of collaboration and organization. These efforts were led by the National Rehabilitation Center in cooperation with the U.S. Department of State, Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement, and International Society for Substance Use Professionals. We thank you all for being here today, and a big thank you goes to these institutions, for you have without a doubt greatly contributed to this outstanding organization of this event. Thank you again, and wish you a useful and a very great week, and have a wonderful day. Thank you very much. شكرا لكم. كل الشكر، ونتمنى لكم أسبوع حافل. خلاص راحوا.